IVM.
Hi, everybody. Just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashton Doctor, your habit coach. And in our last episode, we discussed about yoga. Understanding yoga, how do we get started into yoga? I want to start my own yoga practice and, get the ball rolling. So it was a very interesting and enlightening episode there. Today, we're going to be talking about beyond yoga. What are the things that yoga can be the starting point to on your journey? And I think this is such a fantastic topic because there's so much that we can discuss on this. So join me in welcoming again Namita Piparaya back to the Habit Coach podcast. Namita, welcome back.
Thank you, Ashton. Wonderful to be back here.
So, Namita, you said something very interesting in the last episode, which is what I want to take off from. Right? I asked you, how should a person choose their yoga practice? Because we discussed the different kinds of yoga practices that exist.
Yeah.
And you said, in Ayurveda, there are these prakritis, and you can think about the prakritis and choose according to that. And I found that very interesting, right?
Yeah.
So how does yoga and Ayurveda and all of that mix together?
Yeah, so both are actually sister sciences. They developed in the same, era, and they are very deeply connected because both eventually have a spiritual goal, which is of mindfulness or samadhi in different terms for the same concept. Ayurveda, in particular, helps create a platform for you of good health, which is well integrated with your environment, so you can actually pursue your yogic practices or yogic goals. So, for instance, what Ayurveda basically helps you do is understand yourself better. That's your personality assessment. It's a great tool for self-awareness. And then it helps you understand how you can blend in with your environment without disturbing your core nature too much. And environment is both physical as well as the one we create in our mind with our thoughts and feelings. So that's where they two come through. And Ayurveda also helps make yoga therapeutic because it customizes the practice for you. A lot of people today there are over 2,000 yoga postures. There are books about 2,000 yoga postures. So which one do you choose? So Ayurveda can simplify that, help you tease out which ones to choose basis how your mental or physical state is at the current point in time. So that's the connection between the two.
Like, we've had lots of Ayurveda doctors in the podcast, and we've discussed Ayurveda in different aspects.
Yeah.
But we've never discussed Ayurveda from a yoga point of view.
Yeah.
Right? So what are the aspects that you should look at in order to either choose the yoga practice or the yoga practice help you out in your Ayurveda? How should somebody approach it that way?
So when it comes to Ayurveda and yoga, there are two things. One is prevention, one is cure. So when it comes to cure, when you already have a condition, that's when Ayurveda doctors or allopathic doctors, you would go there. But as a preventive mechanism, what Ayurveda helps you do is understand what do you have a propensity for. Because like we discussed in the previous, that if somebody is Vata dominant, they will have more propensity for, let's say, joint related issues or nervous system related issue, because Vata, or the wind element, rests in your bones and it deals with your thoughts and your mind. So anything that impacts the mind will likely be related to Vata. It's anything that represents movement will be related to Vata. So that is why you know that if this is the predominant dosha in your personality, you have certain propensities. And then you can develop a yoga practice to help balance that out or to enhance whatever is weaker in you. That's one way to look at it.
And what are some of the Ayurvedic practices that you think go extremely well with yoga that people should start thinking about and start doing? Or at least how should they start approaching it?
There's the aspect of Ayurveda which deals with diet and herbs and therapy is more in the realm of Ayurvedic doctors who practice this. So I will not get into that because that also has been written about at length. When I was doing my studies, I was most fascinated by the personality assessment aspect of Ayurveda, that it was helping me along with the Yoga Sutras and my own journey of why am I like this? Why do I have these feelings? And, it's more like a therapeutic journey where you're doing self-assessment at multiple points. So that's what I will dive into, because that is the part of Ayurveda that I think every yoga practitioner should be involved in. So once you have a better understanding of yourself, once you're more aware, then your mindfulness practices are more meaningful because you are able to develop a lifestyle around that. So very simply put, Ayurveda helps you be very intuitive, because you will start noticing that if you are having certain propensities or certain behavioral traits, it's for a reason. And you can, if you think that anxiety is bothering you, or if Pitta people will have a lot of anger issues, they also tend to have more ulcers or digestive issues, and Pitta people love spicy food. So we are our own worst enemies at times, because we have those propensities that kind of take us down the route of addiction. So you will, as a Pitta person, have more cooling practices in your yoga routine. Pitta people will do very well with anything that requires team effort, like acro yoga, or when you're doing something together with other people, because they tend to be competitive and have that spirit, which often can be damaging. So if you are a yoga practitioner and you want to really use your yoga practice to do stress management, then you need to have more understanding of yourselves, because we all fall into a loop of behaving the same way over and over again without any awareness of what we are doing. So when I was studying the Yoga Sutras and doing Ayurveda, it was like light bulbs being flashed on where I was going wrong. And that is when you can work on that. So that's how it integrates into your everyday life, improves your relationships, makes you a better human being, makes you kinder, and helps you work on yourself.
Lovely. So what are some of the prakritis that work well, and how should you think about them and yoga? Like, for example, you spoke about vata. What are the others that you can think of? And
so there are three main energies, which is vata, pitta, and kapha. Vata is your air and space element. Pitta is your fire and water element, like your digestive fluid, acid in the body. And kapha is water and earth. So by nature, vata is air and more mobile, very rough. It can cause erosion. So if you're having a lot of muscle weaknesses, if you are after your sickness, when people become weak, that is vata element just eroding the body. It's mobile, constantly moving. Creative people have a lot of vata, the mind. But if they don't give it a structure and discipline, creative people never finish their projects. So that's one example. So Pitta is, and these three combine. So these three can combine in twos as Vata, Pitta, Pitta, Kapha, Kapha, Vata, or they combine in three to make a three-doshic personality, which is very rare, which is Vata, Pitta, Kapha. So there's seven. So three individual, three groups, and one all three. So 7 broad prototypes.
So for Vata, I think in the last podcast you had said that you would practice a more Hatha kind of an approach, which is a more a stationary hold kind of grounding style of yoga. What would you do for Pitta, for example?
Pitta is moderate, so you would blend both. So while Vata would need grounding and Kapha would need vinyasa, Pitta comes in the middle. Everything in moderation, because Pitta has a tendency to push themselves to the extreme. If you know the kind of people who go in for a burnout, who will work extra more than they should, and that's a Pitta trait, and they need moderation in their life. And so it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Some vinyasa is good for them, but also include holding postures. Do more cooling. Always a Pitta person should end their practice with a cooling pose, like child pose or Makarasana or a forward bend. So for Pitta people, headstand, you should not hold for continuous periods, because headstand creates more heat. It's a energy practice. So Pitta, you would say hold for 15-30 seconds and stop, repeat. A Vata person can hold a headstand for 2 minutes if they want, continuously. It's like that.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, lovely. So what are some of the Ayurvedic practices that you do that have really helped you out in your life? So like, what are some of the, not necessarily in yoga, but more lifestyle oriented Ayurveda practices that our listeners can immediately start thinking of doing?
Yeah, I think I changed a lot of things in my life once I understood myself better with Ayurveda. And number one was diet. So I was into the diet culture. I would eat very little. I had started avoiding ghee like the plague. I wouldn't eat fats, everything. I fell for all of those things of low carb and low everything. And I think once, and it happened actually, I got into Ayurveda during my yoga training. So I was in that intense yoga training. We used to, practice 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. It had been going on for 3 months. I started getting aches and pains. I was a vegan at that point in time. And all I could think of was, I wish I could have a cup of milk with haldi in it. I don't know. I was having cravings for it. I was vegan. I wasn't sure. But, eventually, and there was an Ayurveda practitioner there, and she told me, you're having a vata imbalance because you're doing so much. You're not eating enough fats. You're not eating enough, solid, proper food. So that's when I added milk and I started having ghee, and my aches and pains went away. And that's when I had to review that, go for moderation rather than an extreme form of diet in any manner. My mother tells me I used to be so fond of ghee as a toddler that I used to climb onto the dining table and finish all of it. From there to a body type which probably enjoyed ghee to one which completely cut it out overnight. So there were some things that I became more intuitive, that always listen to the body, what does it need, and everything in moderation, not go overboard. Second thing is in terms of what we want to do in life as well, right? I have a certain brand of yoga that I believe in. I have certain beliefs that I have. And there is, as an entrepreneur, I think a lot of us have conflict over what works versus what sells. And I had my periods of demotivation when brands would come and sell something, although I knew it wasn't good. And I think with Ayurveda, there was a reinforcement. This is me. I am here to live as per my calling, my nature. And I can't go against my nature because that will create conflict, that will create burnout. So more and more of following your true path. And, this message can come from different areas. For me, it came through Ayurveda that this is my path. I don't have to deviate. Sort of like also what, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, that's where Shri Krishna is telling Arjuna that you are a warrior, that's your path. This is what you're truly meant for. And you can have this existential crisis that I am here as a yoga teacher, but then who am I? Should I be doing this? Or maybe I should just go back to my job instead of pandering to whatever is going to be successful. So I think these things were both in terms of self-work, and my own philosophy helped me. So it won't be your typical yoga Ayurveda in terms of do these 5 rituals or have this diet. For me, it's my body knows. There are some days I start with a lemon water in the morning. Some days I don't feel like having, I just have warm water. Some days I feel like adding honey to that lemon water, and I do that because my environment is changing. My mind is in different states. I use yoga and Ayurveda as things that help me counterbalance all of that. So that's why my yoga and Ayurvedic rituals are variable. They fit into my day rather than my whole life fitting around doing yoga. So if I've had a hectic day, my yoga will be different. If I'm feeling energetic, my yoga practice will be different. It's not fixed and regimented that this is the only thing I will do, because yoga is the input into my life, not the output of my life. That's the fundamental difference I think Ayurveda made in my life.
We're going to take a quick break. See you on the other side.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Agla Station Adulthood, Ritasha and Ayushi are in conversation with journalist Pallavi Iyer. They talk about her having lived in so many different cities, adulting through it all, and what motherhood means to her and how young folk can lead better lives and support the nation's progress. On Smarter with Sid, Siddharth asks if energy management is just a better way of time management. Tune in to find out if this is practical and possible. On Khel Niti, Rajiv Mishra, Ayaz Memon and Sabah Karim talk about Team India's elimination from the T20 World Cup, Pakistan's new team, and New Zealand stepping into the semi-finals. On Smile India, Shifa discusses a Kolkata-based NGO that's trying to help single-screen cinema survive. And on Hans Vani, hear the story Mere Liye Ek Minute and find out why a depressed man mourns his own death by observing silence for a whole minute. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And do follow us on YouTube. We have a number of different channels. You can find them on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube, where you'll be able to take a look at all of the channels we have. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week: Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, Slay Coffee, Intel, and Oxfam India. Thank you so much. You make this possible.
Welcome back. Let's jump into the conversation. So this whole thing of intuitive eating and, my body is saying I should do this. My body tells me I should have chocolate cake every morning, chocolate cake for like lunch, chocolate cake for dinner. Like, how do I understand and actually listen to what my body wants?
Yeah.
Is different from these kinds of, extremist desires.
It's two things come here. That is why meditation practice or mindfulness practice is very important, because that will help you recognize sources of stress a bit sooner than. And I'm not saying I will never I don't have sweet cravings. I'll still have that, but it's not as much as it used to be before too. Because what is mindfulness? You're aware. You're not on autopilot. You're not constantly reacting the same way. It's a subtle process that happens. You become aware of what's stressing you out. Once that awareness is there, you're able to resolve it sooner than it reaches a stage where I need other sources of treatment, which could be through sweet food. And I'm not saying every time a sweet craving is happening, you're treating yourself, but in a general, overall sense. So one is awareness. Second is taking a moment. You should have that piece of cake, but only thing you would do is, instead of eating it mindlessly or that chocolate, have a slow it down a bit, savor the moment, enjoy that chocolate. And I'm telling you, sometimes when you start doing that, you can't get through one slice of cake, you can't get through more than 2 squares of chocolate. It's the same principle they apply in smoking. All they tell smokers is, when they are trying to cure them, that just enjoy your smoke, notice how it feels. And this is actual mindfulness treatment that has been used. And then the smokers start, oh, it tastes bad, why am I doing this? Or that sensations become heightened, and you don't enjoy it as much. Same thing with your sweet cravings. Slow it down, mindfulness.
Slow it down, become more mindful about what you're doing. Maybe that's when you will actually realize that, should I be having this? What else is my body asking for? Yeah. Interesting.
And another thing in Ayurveda is you should not suppress. There are some things that we should not either suppress hunger, thirst, and 13 other urges. They list it. So suppression doesn't work, because it just builds up. And, I've been into dieting, and anybody who's been into dieting will tell you will suppress it. And at some point you will overeat. It builds up. So suppression doesn't work. You have that piece of cake, enjoy it, and then little piece by piece. And it takes time. It's a slow process. Yeah.
So, there's this whole concept of Ayurveda.
Yeah.
You were also talking about philosophy as something that you were interested in, and yoga took you through that path. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I got introduced to Yoga Sutras in my teacher training. And honestly, before I went for the TTC, I didn't even know what they were, because you are all about yoga is asanas. And in the Yoga Sutras, so this is where Sage Patanjali comes in. We often associate him with Patanjali with yoga, but he was actually the one who collected these 200 verses on yoga, very succinct, very powerful. And it's the Bible of yoga for most, beginners. And the very first thing, when he answers, what is yoga? He says, yoga chitta vritti nirodha, which is basically yoga is calming your mind. So if anybody asks you what is yoga, it's not being able to do a headstand. It's not holding your breath for 1 minute. It's just being able to calm your mind. And I think it was Swami Vivekananda who gave a very good explanation that you look at a pond, and if you mess up with the pond, then there is a lot of disturbance. You can't see what's at the bottom. But once the water calms down, you can clearly see what's at the bottom. And that's yoga. Once you can see your true self, or you can make this distinction between the environment and sensory exposure to what truly is you, that's yoga. So that, I think, was the moment when I started wondering, why did I send my mother that picture of this pose I want to do vis-a-vis how calm is my mind? And that introspection then helped me change my approach and understanding of yoga. And that whole text, actually, it's a bit complicated, but there are a lot of good translations out there, including one by Swami Vivekananda. It's a very thin book. It's a basic book to start with. It transformed my life, because it was, let's say, my first exposure to therapy. It was my self-therapy. I was reading it. I was understanding myself. And we've all had trauma. I personally, growing up, I went through a divorce. I had a difficult childhood, all of that. And I could see patterns in my behavior, which is what the text talks about. And I think that also is the foundation of modern therapy. You have patterns you develop through your childhood, and how do you break them? And that's what the sutras also teach you. So I think it was quite enlightening for me that it's not just the poses. This is how I can do yoga in my life, that if I'm getting bothered by what somebody's saying to me, how do I react to that? That is also yoga. I choose to react differently than I've been doing all my life.
Tell me 2-3 things from these books that really hit you hard, for example, or what are things that are key learnings that we can think about right now?
Yeah, so one thing is the concept of sanskar. So, I've heard childhood iske sanskar achhe hain, iske sanskar achhe nahi hai, but I never really thought what is this sanskars that we talk about. And the Yoga Sutras talk about it. So this, if you believe in rebirth, these are like seeds in our subconscious, which make us react in a certain way, which make us have feelings in a certain way. And these are embedded in us due to our past experiences or past lives, whatever you call it. I'm just going to say past experiences here. And what the Yoga Sutra, I think one interesting learning was that you can suppress these, they can get subdued and they may not arise. So let's say I have the seed of anger at an X topic. So that is a propensity I have. With practice of yoga to a certain degree, that can tone down. But end of the day, it's a seed. Given the right environment, if it gets enough water, sun, and food, that seed can rise up again. So which is why, in order to burn that seed, is why you have to do meditation. That is what you call samadhi. That's the ultimate stage at which you have burned that the very root cause is gone. But till such time, we will all have the propensity, given, or if you read stories of Vishwamitra, had the seed, it wasn't burned. So when the right environment came, broke through. And I think that helped me understand that as a yoga teacher, we can have very high expectations. People have, you must never get sick, you must never get angry, or you are like this superhuman who doesn't have normal human emotions. So we all have that, but it's a journey where we are continuously trying to work and move towards that stage of, let's say, burning the seed. Was one.
Now that you mention it, I'm sure there's so much pressure on you for these kinds of things, right? You ever go through imposter syndrome where you're like, should I be
Every time
doing this?
I get angry, I think I do, because it's natural, right? I'm having a fight with my husband and I'm thinking, okay, now, it's natural. I don't know if it's imposter, but there's a feeling of guilt that used to come, but now, once you're more open about it. But every time you have a fight, you don't want to go on social media and say, hey, I had a fight. I just want to be honest about it. But it's things like these, right? They're normal stuff that happens by virtue of having your life out there in the public. But yeah, it's imposter syndrome I haven't had yet, but yes, doubts.
These kinds of doubts come in.
Yeah, doubts come in. Yeah. Am I being honest enough?
So I wanted to ask you something that you mentioned in passing. You were saying that, and I realized it wasn't about your one-handed pinch mayurasana as a thing, but more towards having a quieter mind. And you can send a picture of a one-handed pinch mayurasana.
Yeah.
But how do you express a quietened mind, right?
Yeah.
So how do you know when you are having a quiet mind? How do you know when you're not? Like, where did you notice that aha moment saying, it happened?
Yeah. It happened. Actually, you will notice. The challenge is everybody else may not notice unless they're living with you and seeing you how they are. So you can't take a picture of that quiet moment and share on social media, but you will notice it. It happens when you're meditating. It happens to me every time I do what is called sectional breathing, and it's a foundational breathing technique I recommend every beginner should do. I've been doing it almost every day. You get that feeling after you've done some deep breathing, your especially deep belly breathing, your nervous system starts relaxing. I mean, 10, 12 breaths you will notice. And then you zone out. And there are obviously experiences in meditation people have, whether they are psychosomatic or subconscious or real. It remains to be discovered. But yes, you will know, because it's different from how you are the rest of the day. And if you want to experience that moment, I think a very good practice is Yoga Nidra. So Yoga Nidra is the practice which puts you in the stage of just about falling to sleep, but not yet asleep. It's that good state of where you should be when you're meditating. You are not sleeping, but you're still aware. And that is where I feel most beginners will be able to understand what it feels like to have that aha moment. Because everybody will remember that just before they slept in Yoga Nidra, there was that moment. You keep coming back to it.
There was a fraction of a moment where you could understand, this is what it feels like.
Yeah.
Do you have a good Yoga Nidra follow along that people can?
Yeah, I have on YouTube, and I think a lot of people have enjoyed it. You will find it on my YouTube, Yoga Nama. There is at least one Yoga Nidra session there. On Yoga Nama TV, there are a couple more.
Okay, and we're definitely going to try and link it in the show notes below. So if you send us a link, we'll put it in.
I'll do that.
Lovely. So the philosophies behind yoga is something that started catching your attention, is something that you became passionate about as you went along, right? then after that, what was the journey? Where else did it take you?
It was an interesting journey. It has been the same continuous for a while because it's self-work, right? It doesn't change. You just keep working on yourself, and that's something that inherently motivates me. So I'm happy. But I'll talk a little bit about how it was initially. So when I first read the Yoga Sutras, I was super excited. Oh my God, this is so good. You over apply things to yourself. I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. Oh, so much to be done. As a typical Pitta personality who can be very self-critical, I was all into it. And then I decided I should go to an ashram. And obviously, my partner at that time was like, what's happening? Because I was going to go away without any contact. It was a very strict ashram for about a few months. We even went and saw the place, very basic, nothing much. And I was very enthusiastic about it. And I think that is a situation a lot of people go through, wherein a lot of people have been, that you get into this journey, then you're like, I want to give up this worldly life and I want to just retire from everything else. So I had my own journey of, introspection and, wondering what next, because giving up the relationship or going to the ashram. And I'm glad I did not go to the ashram, because because you end up achieving it becomes a very self-centered approach. Then that's what I think my husband, you do study all of this for yourself, or so that everybody else around you could benefit, because now you're giving up your responsibilities. And is that a escapism or more like putting to practice? And I think I had my own thinking to do, decided to stay back. And I think that is how Yoga Nama came to be. So that was one part of the journey, which was a big one. But from there, actually, instead of seeking externally how I can work on myself, I managed to build it into my own life, that you don't give up your responsibilities in order to follow this path. And I think this happens with a lot of people when they get into philosophy. We start disconnecting from this world and moving into the more individualistic world of isolation.
Correct.
Yeah.
In Zen, there's this very interesting story that says that you have to go to the mountains, but you have to come back to the market.
Yeah,
right? You go to the mountain, but you have to come back to the market. You have to come back to the real world with this hustle and bustle and all of that.
Yeah.
And if you don't come back, you're selfish, right? And at that point of time, they say you're useless to the world. So it's a very interesting way of putting it down. Yeah.
That's true. And actually, that's when I started reading the Bhagavad Gita and Karma Yoga concept. So there's Jnana Yogis and everything. That really helped me understand what I needed to do with my life better. So that, I think, book played an important role in not wanting to withdraw, but to stay here and fight my own battle.
Correct. Because and it is important to be selfish at times, but you cannot live your life like that. It is about coming back. It's about community. It's all about all those things, which actually add a lot more value to your life and to the world around you. So that balance is very, very important. Now,
yeah, I really like what you said, that if not, then you're useless to the world, and we want to be relevant to the world. Not
exactly.
Useless. That was a very good line.
You're part of it, right?
That. Yeah.
And like you said, it's escapism if you're not.
Yeah.
Of course, it's hard to give up everything and go. And of course, it's a challenge. And yes, do it. Yeah. But remember there to come back. Yeah. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
Corrective exercise. That's something that you do. Why?
Yeah.
Why did you suddenly get into that?
Because, a lot of people come to yoga in a class because they have aches and pains or issues, and they then feel like yoga will help them fix it. And I used to feel quite at loss, because it's inevitable. A lot of people come to yoga every time in a class. I have this problem, I have that problem. Can you suggest something? And I can't, because in a yoga teacher training is 1 month. You barely study any anatomy. You don't have that expertise. And I think at some point in time, just didn't like that I had to say no to so many people. And I found that corrective exercise would help me integrate these into my yoga practice. So if you have carpal tunnel, if everybody recommends some random techniques which may or may not work, but with corrective exercise, I can assess people. I understand what the issue is. I know which yoga techniques I can use. If somebody has a posture problem, they have rounded shoulders, anterior, posterior pelvic tilt. All of these were questions I used to get a lot. And, I want to help people. And there's a temptation as a yoga teacher, you want to say, okay, do this, do that. But I would end up saying, not trained for this, you need to go to a physiotherapist. But because I was having so many people coming and to asking these questions, I wanted to integrate. And that's how corrective exercise came into my
teaching.
Yeah.
So now, what is your next level of journey that you're going to be doing? What is the next beyond yoga part that is on the horizon?
So when I started Yoganama, I had one vision, which was yoga for everyday life. Everyday people, everyday life, how we can make it a part of our practice. And I think I'm going to work on that because now I have all the tools. I've done everything. I know yoga, Ayurveda, philosophy, and now also corrective exercise. So one is to build up on Yoganama TV, because I think that's something that's going to really help people. Instead of just being limited to Mumbai and the studios here, I get to share my teaching across a wider audience. I'm also working on a book which will help connect all of these that I know I've learned and I am passionate about. So that's going to be second. And third is my content creation will continue through Yoganama TV, through my website, where I have a blog and I write at length on these subjects. I also have a dosha quiz on my website, so those who want to know what their prakriti or dosha type is. So that continues.
Lovely. Can you just tell us what is the website and how people can connect with you?
It's yoganama.com. So that's my website. You can also connect with me on Instagram, Yoganama, and my email is namita@yoganama.com. So you will find all of this information even on my Instagram handle, and I will look forward to hearing from everyone.
Yay, perfect. Namita, I absolutely love this podcast. Thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with us.
Thanks a lot, Ashton. It was lovely to be here and connect with you. Thank you.
Super. Thank you.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashton Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com, or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME180. That's Awesome180.
Usually in a podcast, it's me who speaks to you and you who listens. But I've been seeing your comments and it's time. It's me listening to you. Following the overwhelming success of this podcast, the good folks at IVM Podcast Network have decided to come up with a Kannada adaptation of the show for those who prefer listening to it in that language. Do make sure you let your Kannada speaking friends know about this as well.
Are you looking for finance products and services that can enhance your personal finance experience? Are you looking for a space to talk about your financial product or service? And are you looking for a crisp talk show where the conversation is all about money? Well, your search ends here. Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta and I'm host of the Paisa Vaisa podcast, and I invite you for the conversation about your personal finance on each Monday on the IVM Podcast app or the website or on any podcast streaming platforms. See you folks.